Good evening, I'm Pinky Webb. Tonight we ask the questions, we tackle the issues, we clarify matters, and we get on point. The Philippines has maintained its Tier 1 ranking in the U.S. Department of State Trafficking in Persons report last year. Well, the Justice Department says it proves the government's gains to eliminate all forms of human exploitation. More needs to be done to end this crime. Let's get on point with Inter-Agency Council Against Trafficking Undersecretary Nicholas Felix Ty. Yusek T, good to finally have you here in the studio. Maraming salamat po sa inyong oras.
Thank you for having me, Ma'am Pinky.
Siguro just an overview, exactly what is IACAT?
Okay. IACAT is the Inter-Agency Council Against Trafficking. It's this umbrella council that consists of 28 organizations, 25 of which are government agencies and 3 are NGOs. It's that council that coordinates the anti-trafficking efforts of all these various agencies that are so varied. No? Some are law enforcement like PNP, NBI, and the DOJ. Some are more on the social welfare side like DSWD, NACC, DMW. Some are on the immigration side. Some are on the for minorities like NCIP. So because human trafficking is such a multifarious concern, you really have to bring all these agencies, all these stakeholders into the mix to coordinate their efforts.
You said there are 3 NGOs.
Yes.
Who are they?
The NGOs are the International Justice Mission, who represents the interests of children. There's the Blast Ople Policy Center, who represents the interests of OFWs. And the third one is, okay, escapes you now. But there's another one that represents women.
Right. Okay. So tatlo pong NGO yon together with 4 government agents. 24 rather. 25 sorry. 25 for a total of 28. And when we talk about human trafficking, siguro just a definition of human trafficking.
There's a legal definition, but it's kind of technical. But let's go to something that hopefully will be more relatable. Yes. Yeah. In essence, human trafficking is about exploiting the vulnerabilities of individuals. Usually those vulnerabilities can be poverty, being a minor, being part of a minority group, gender, disability. And these vulnerabilities are exploited for purposes of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or organ trafficking. And typically, the means that are employed by the traffickers, it can be varied. It can be force, can be fraud, or can be coercion.
You talked about 3. You said it could be sex, labor, or organ trafficking.
Yes.
What is the most dominant?
Right now, the one that is most prosecuted and most detected in the Philippines is sex trafficking. And within that umbrella, within that concept, there are so many types of sex trafficking.
Such as?
Such as, well, the typical prostitution that we know, that's a form of sex trafficking, but there's another one that's more insidious, the one we call online sexual abuse and exploitation of children, where you have children who are sadly victimized by their own relatives.
Their own family.
Their own family, yeah. And their victimization is live streamed in exchange for compensation from usually foreign predators.
Yusek, why is sex trafficking the most dominant in the country?
It's the most dominant now because it's probably the one that's most controversial, or that really affects us most. But it doesn't mean that the other forms of human trafficking are less evil. But it's definitely the one that we've had a lot of capacity to handle, and it's the one that a lot of our law enforcers and prosecutors, they have the expertise to handle it. The other forms of human trafficking, they can be a little more tricky, like for example, labor trafficking or even organ trafficking, because more often than not, there's an element of consent there by the victims of human trafficking. Like for example, some victims of labor trafficking, they really want to work because they are mired in poverty. And they allow
so is sex trafficking.
Yeah, so is sex trafficking. Yeah, that's correct. But usually when it's the child that's the victim of the parent, that's one thing. That's where it's easier to detect for us, and it galvanizes us more to take action.
I remember many years ago, I would have stories on that particular issue, minors being offered on cam, live, to normally they're foreigners.
Yes, yeah. Usually.
That's usually what happens. So that is basically human trafficking. In a way, it's really exploiting the vulnerabilities, whether with or without consent
Correct.
of the particular person. Have we made gains in terms of, let's say, sex trafficking, labor
Yes.
trafficking, or organ trafficking?
The most gains have been made in the area of sex trafficking, because I remember more than 9 years ago, when we were still in Tier 2 or Tier 2 watches in the U.S. Trip Report, that was one of the biggest concerns of the U.S. State Department, who would assess different countries. And Philippines really took a lot of steps there, from something as simple as raiding prostitution establishments. But right now, our response has been very good for that, because when there are new modus of human trafficking that arise, we are in a position to respond to it, which is exactly what happened in online sexual abuse and exploitation of children. For labor trafficking, we're getting there. The POGOs really provided us this venue to address labor trafficking more, because for in the POGOs, it is really clear how the exploitation of usually foreign POGO workers happen there. And that's why there has been, the past few years, there's been a quite significant increase in our labor trafficking cases.
It's good to talk about that one by one also, especially the labor trafficking. But what allowed us to make that gain from Tier 2 to Tier 1? And what does it mean?
A lot of things. A lot of things put us in the position to gain. First and foremost, it's budget. Congress, through the years, constantly increased the budget of the IACAT, and that's one factor that was considered by the U.S. State Department. Another is training of the different actors against human trafficking, from the prosecutors to the law enforcers to social workers. There was training there. There was better coordination and collaboration, and then there were the results in terms of the cases: more investigations, more prosecutions, more convictions. And then in terms of the victims who were being rescued, there was an increase in the number. So the data really showed how through the years there was a significant increase in the accomplishments of the Philippine government.
Budget, you talked about an increase in budget. What is the budget of IACAT?
You know, it's not that big. It's around 140, 150 million for 2025.
150
Yeah, 150 million.
M.
Yes, 150 M.
Yeah.
It's not that big.
It's
That's
not
why
big at all.
I remember during the earlier years of IACAT, I was told, and even up to now, it's really important for us to tap NGOs, because NGOs are in the position to share their resources, share their know-how, and coordinate with government for us to be able to address the problem. And then at the same time, foreign governments actually help us out a lot. So we have partnerships with Australia, the US, and other European countries in the fight against human trafficking.
And I guess, Yusek, NGOs are organizations that victims can easily run to, or
Yes.
they have known them for a number of years to be able to trust them.
Yes, or NGOs are one, but you know, NGOs, the work of NGOs are likewise very varied. Some NGOs, like the International Justice Mission, one of the members of IACAT, they work on policy. In fact, Republic Act 11930, our anti-OSAIC law, that was originated by IJM. And at the same time, IJM is actually involved in the operations and prosecution against OSAIC. On the other hand, you have NGOs that focus more on aftercare of the victims. So it's really, again, it's no one size fits all. Take a look at these NGOs. We're very grateful for their presence there, and the way that they help us. It's very varied, the way that they help the government.
And when really was IACAT put together?
It was put together, I think, in the mid-2000s. The anti-trafficking law was passed then, and then IACAT consisted of, I think, around 14 agencies back then. Then the very recent amendment to IACAT, to the anti-trafficking law, which took place in 2022, increased membership to 28. But it doesn't mean that it's only the members of IACAT who are working on this. There are a lot of other stakeholders who are helping us out, who are not necessarily members of IACAT. I can name so many of them. One is PAOK. Yeah. PAOK has been our partner in the fight against illegal POGOs, and they have been very instrumental in our endeavors. And a lot of other NGOs do help us out as well. And then other agencies like TESDA, OWA, while not IACAT members, they have an integral role as well.
How does TESDA help?
TESDA helps for aftercare, because our trafficking victims, one of the ways that we let them be reintegrated into society and avoid re-victimization is that they are given skills.
Yeah, train them with new skills.
Train them with new skills.
Yeah.
That hopefully those will be the skills that will reduce their vulnerability to human trafficking.
So, in terms of, you were saying in the Philippines, the most dominant would be sex trafficking. What else needs to be done in order to reduce or somehow stem this particular problem?
Awareness. The need for awareness will never cease. That's why I'm very thankful that you invited me tonight. A lot of other media partners I've actually been inviting IACAT and IACAT member agencies, and every time there's an opportunity, we truly pounce on that. Because if people know, especially the victims, if they are aware of this danger, this human trafficking, if they are put in this position to be victimized, maybe they won't be victimized.
Tell us, Yusek, the problem of Filipinos being, or the modus of Filipinos being sex trafficked. Would that be the right word?
Yes.
Abroad?
Sex trafficker, a typical modus is a recruiter. There will be a recruiter, sometimes online, sometimes a common friend who would refer them or recruit them to that particular endeavor. Sometimes they would know what they're getting into, sometimes not. Sometimes the invitation is to a job, perhaps in a restaurant, perhaps in customer service. Then it turns out they're gonna work in a bar or in a brothel. So something like that.
Madami ho ba ang nabibiktima?
Marami pa rin. Sadly, marami pa rin. But tayo naman, tuloy lang ang trabaho.
Yeah.
At malaking bagay talaga na ang tingin ng US State Department, it's not the incidence of human trafficking, it's not the absence of human trafficking, it's really the efforts. The efforts, the consistent and the comprehensive effort of the government. And I think that's the reason why Philippines has maintained its Tier 1 ranking for 9 years now.
I'm not sure if you would answer this, but for Filipinos who are sex trafficked abroad, which would that particular country be wherein the Filipinos are most victimized, if at all there is one?
Okay, we've had reports of some Filipinos being victimized in Malaysia, in establishments in Malaysia, and then some in Korea, in Jeju Island, is one particular location. And then sometimes maybe in the Middle East as well. But usually sex trafficking happens, the victims that we rescue from sex trafficking are in the Asian continent.
We'll be taking a very short break. We'll be back with IACAT Undersecretary Nicholas Felix Ty. Stay tuned. This is On Point. Welcome back. You're still watching On Point. Still with us, Inter-Agency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT Undersecretary Nicholas Felix Ty. I want to talk about yung mga Pilipino po, yung mga kababayan natin na madalas natatraffic po abroad and end up working in scam farms or scam hubs. First of all, what are the modes of recruitment? I mean, I want to talk about this just so I know some of them may already know how. But for those who are still possibly, baka ma-recruit, ano ho ba yung modes of recruitment?
It's always online. And before, the case was that they will be invited to a customer service representative job in a call center, usually in Thailand or somewhere in Southeast Asia.
So call center normally, okay.
Call center, customer service representative. And when they go there, the usual point of entry back then was Bangkok. And then from Bangkok, they would be whisked into a vehicle and brought to the border of Myanmar, and they would cross the border and work in Mayawadi. That's that area very close to Thailand where a lot of scam hubs proliferated.
Where is that?
That's in Myanmar,
Also
close to
in
the
Myanmar.
border with Thailand.
Okay.
But Myanmar is, I think most of the Filipinos who are victimized in scam hubs abroad are in Myanmar, but there are also some instances in Laos and Cambodia. There it's a more direct route, but in Myanmar, that's the usual route.
So what I've been reading is that they would be invited to, they will be employed rather.
Yes.
For example, in a Southeast Asian country.
Yes.
And then ang sweldo daw is more or less $1,000.
Basic salary.
Basic. And I guess I want to talk about that, Yusek, because if somebody were to work in a call center abroad. That doesn't seem like that's a red flag. If you were being offered $1,000, would I be correct? Because that would be the average sweldo po na i-offer sa isang Pilipino.
Yes, yes. But the red flags are you don't go through the usual processes of the Philippines. I think all, if not most, if not all Filipinos know that if you want to work abroad, you have to have certain clearances from the DMW. So for that, they travel as tourists and they end up there. So that's already a big red flag.
So pag sabihin na sa inyo na, huwag kayong mag-alala, magtatrabaho kayo dito, pero papasok kayo, you're coming in as a tourist, we'll
Yes.
take care of everything. Don't believe that.
Yeah, that's a big red flag.
Yun na po.
Yes,
Because if you were to work abroad, you have to go through the proper channels here in the Philippines. So
Tama.
yung palang magtaka na sila.
Yes.
Okay.
And you know, it goes further because around 2023, Philippine government was in on it already. We're already aware of that modus. That's why a lot of Filipinos who were posing as tourists to travel to these scam hubs, they were being deferred. Their departure was being deferred from the airports. And what they would do, what the recruiters and these Filipinos would do is that they would go through informal channels, through the so-called back door. And when they go through that, that's a very, very tedious and dangerous process. You go inter-island, then you're going to first land in Sabah,
Yeah.
and then from Sabah, you're going to take a flight to Thailand. So that's another big red
Isa pa
flag.
yun, yeah. Matakot na kayo kapag,
Yes.
kapag ganon. What happens in these scam hubs and what are the normal scams?
Yes.
What are the most dominant prevalent scams in these farms?
Prevalent scam are the crypto scams or the love scams. And what happens, I think most of us already know what happens there, right? If they don't meet their quotas,
Sinasaktan ba talaga sila?
yeah. So in many sinasaktan, no? Like madaming mga Pilipino na kakauwi lang galing sa Myanmar dahil nga madaming nagsara doon, no? Madaming sinara yung Myanmar government doon. At
Due to the earthquake, was it?
no, even
okay.
prior to the earthquake. What happened there was that because I don't know if you saw the news, and there was a Chinese actor who was ironically trafficked into one of the scam hubs. He was lured there under pretense of some shoot, and he ended up in the scam hub. Because of that, the Chinese government got really angry, and both Myanmar and Thailand cracked down. What Thailand did was, because the setup was that for the scam hubs in Mayawadi, their electricity and other utilities were actually coming from the Thai side of the border. So Thailand cut off power and utilities to the scam hubs in Mayawadi. And then I think at the same time, the Myanmar government, and so they closed down. They closed down, and there was a mass repatriation of foreign nationals. So
I see.
from there, I think we were able to repatriate 200 Filipinos.
Wow.
Yes.
And ano po yung mga kwento nila?
May mga iba nagkwento sa kanila. Kung di sila nakakuta, talagang tinotorture sila, di pinapakain. May mga iba sa kanila nagpakita, may mga pasapasa sa katawan.
What happens? Did they say that everything is confiscated from them the moment they get there? Confiscate yung passport, pati ba cellphone, kino-confiscate?
Typically, passports, kino-confiscate. Cellphone, kailangan yung cellphone sa trabaho nila. So, di ko lang alam kung may mga binablock na mga apps. But sometimes we do get calls for help from victims, from Filipino victims in these scam hubs through mobile applications.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because if they are being taken hostage there, they're there against their will, and they're allowed to keep their phones, it will be quite easy for them to call their family back here in the Philippines at magsumbong, such as some of our kababayans have done in the past.
I think the office apps, the office devices, I think wala doon yung mga communication apps that they can use. So they have to use their personal phones to call their families or whoever.
Kasi saan po ako nagtataka dito is if they are being taken against their will, and they're hostage po sila doon, madali yung tumawag
Yes.
at magsumbong, which again, as I mentioned a while ago, which they did. In fact,
Yes.
meron pong dalawa very recently that
Yes.
arrived from, I believe, Cambodia, na nagsumbong po sa GMA, actually,
Yes.
7, at na-rescue nga po sila. Thank God for that. So, I guess my question is, how can they be kept there and keep their phones when they can easily call for help?
Well, again, their personal phones are not that accessible to them. And I think one of the bigger concerns there is that these scam hubs, like the scam hubs here, they're like fortresses. They can't easily get out of there. For the ones in Myanmar and in Mayawadi, that's actually an area that's not controlled by the Myanmar government. It's controlled by a rebel faction. So there are a lot of factors that make it difficult for them to just get out of there.
So, do we have even a number of trafficked Filipinos in these countries?
There was an estimate from the Department of Foreign Affairs a few weeks ago after we repatriated the 200 that in Myanmar, there's probably an estimated around 60 Filipinos there.
60.
That remain. 60, yeah, 60. So there are probably less Filipinos in Laos and Cambodia. So if we're going to make an estimate there, maybe around 100. But the thing is, the number could still increase because Filipinos still try to go out of the country and work in these establishments.
And I guess that's the question that needs to be asked, because this is not as if this is not something we are not reporting. This has come out in the news. The government has warned everyone, a lot of our kababayans about this, and yet we still fall. Some of them still fall prey to these syndicates, I guess. No, syndicates for sure. They are syndicates. What can we actually do? What more can we do? Because even sa immigration, di ho ba? They've gotten strict to the point that sometimes it becomes incredible what they already ask some of the passengers. How do we actually put a balance into trying to prevent somebody from being trafficked to actually just asking the right questions to Filipinos going abroad?
That's difficult because for us, for the Philippines, our policy has always been for our kababayans that we help them out. We understand their need for work, and if they find themselves in a bind abroad, we do everything we can to bring them home. And when they get home, they get a lot of benefits. Okay, but one of the things that we're debating on is those who go out a lot, right? Because there have been cases of Filipinos who have been repatriated, and they go out again and they're repatriated yet again. Maybe it's time to rethink, are they truly victims of human trafficking? Because when these Filipinos go out of the country, try to go out of the country, there are some minor crimes that are being committed, especially the ones who have to fake who go to the back door. So they have to fake their travel. There has to be a fake passport stamp there. So there's already a crime there. Some of the Filipinos whose departures are deferred at the airport, some of them present fake OFW certificates. There's already a crime there, but we don't prosecute that because we consider them as...
Are we not able to determine if they're fake?
We are able to determine if they're fake, and that's why we don't allow them to travel because they're fake. But the question is that...
Ba't kayo pumapayag? Siguro obviously out of desperation because mas malaki po ang kita doon. Pero yung problema naman na kakaharapin nila pagdating nila doon, why? Bakit ka makikipagsapalaran? I guess that's really the question. So we have Filipinos who are trafficked abroad. And you said that maybe Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, that would number about more or less 100, give or take, right?
For now, yeah.
What about those trafficked here?
Okay.
Is that a problem as well?
Well, at the moment, so for the POGOs, the big scam hubs, the big POGOs, they're gone. So the likes of Banban and Porac, or even the buildings in Pasay, where you have self-contained communities. We no longer have that. You have these mom-and-pop operations in resorts, in residential areas, or some even work from home, where you have these kinds of operations. When you go there, it's not as insidious as it was before. You don't have the same modus operandi where you have a torture chamber. So we're not sure if we can still consider them as victims of human trafficking. But if they testify, we can still pursue.
I guess every time you see that video, when we report on it, na sinalakay ng PAOK at magkasanib na puwersa ng PAOK, NBI, and then makikita niyo po yung video na pumasok sa isang building na, a well-known building, for example, there's like hundreds or 1,000 of them there. Tapos nakagano na lang, nagtatago sila. I mean, it makes one think that they obviously know what they're doing, but the question is, are they being forced? Do they say they're being forced? Do they know what they're doing? O yung iba talagang napilitan at hinostage na doon? Yun po yung mga maraming tanong doon
Yes. That's why victim identification is important. We should have system, we should have our rules, the frontliners should be capacitated to be able to identify who a victim is. And it's not that easy because sometimes these foreign nationals, they want to be here. They want to remain. There have been so many instances when foreign nationals are rescued from big pogos. One of the questions that they ask us is, can I still stay in the Philippines to work here?
Yeah.
And if they work here, chances are they're going to end up in a similar establishment.
And that's the issue with the immigration as well,
Yes.
because once they are caught, but they have a valid working visa, what happens? Are they in violation of their visa? Can't they be deported? Because if you have a working visa here and you're caught, for example, in a pogo hub, which has been declared illegal since the end of last year, are they allowed to stay here?
The visa is no longer valid because the visa would have been sponsored by that pogo hub. If the pogo hub is already closed, that visa, for all intents and purposes, is already
Supposed
terminated.
to be, no? Yeah, because I heard the immigration spokesperson say that some of the individuals that were caught in pogo operations were released because they have valid working visa. So I'm presupposing that their visa was not for the pogo, but for something else.
Some of those, I think there were like SRRVs, the other kinds of visas, the special SIRV, the special investor resident visa, or the SRRV. They had other kinds of visas.
Maybe as a last question, Yusek, how big of a help was the president's pronouncement that pogo had to end December 31 of 2024?
That was huge because the pogos lost their veneer of legality. Because for the longest time, it was difficult for us to go into those pogos because they would always show that they had a license from PAGCOR or from some other government institution. So, and then at the same time, some of the pogos actually decided to pack up and leave. So there was a significant exodus of foreign nationals from the Philippines. And it's clear that while some remain, there was a very significant pivot in the way they do business. So you no longer have these big license institutions or organizations. You have these small mom-and-pop operations that are much easier for us to get into, to operate against.
And because we know it's illegal,
Yes.
it is illegal.
That's correct.
Di ba? Kasi kahit na gusto mo magparenta ng mga condo units mo now, you're a little bit more careful,
Yes.
or you are definitely more careful because you don't want it to be used for, obviously, any illegal activity. Inter-Agency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT, Undersecretary Nicholas Ty. Pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for your time. And that's On Point. Join us again tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. here on BNC, the Billionario News Channel. I'm Pinky Webb. Thank you for watching.